Lauren Riihimaki had spent many years of her life pursuing a creative path in the media industry. Her workplace was no easy environment, but it was the fierce competition, the harshness of the marketing world, and the sleepless nights that made her even more determined. In the beginning, Lauren was just a newcomer, full of enthusiasm and expectations. But unlike her colleagues, she didn't just do her job to make a living. Lauren had a deep passion for crafting innovative and creative strategies. She always believed that success in this field wasn't just about talent, it was also about persistence, understanding human emotions, and knowing how to touch the hearts of the audience. She also knew that, in the media industry, those who dared to break the mold, those who took risks to change things, would make a difference. In the early days, Lauren worked at a large media company where everything was controlled by experienced professionals. To rise up, she not only needed to demonstrate her talent, but also had to please the strategic-minded leaders. However, Lauren didn't care about winning anyone's favor. She wanted to prove her worth through real results. Eventually, the campaign she built started to achieve impressive successes, bringing profit to the company, increasing revenue, and expanding the brand's reach. She became a name mentioned by many within the company. Gradually, Lauren's position became more solid. She was entrusted with managing major projects, and the trust from her colleagues and the leadership only grew. But just when she thought everything was stable, a shock hit, and this time, it didn't come from the outside, but from the people closest to her, those she thought she could trust. It was these very people who shattered her. Shana, her closest friend, the colleague who had stood by her all this time, was the first to push her out of the company. The story began when an important marketing campaign that Lauren and Shana had worked on for a long time was suddenly canceled. And not only that, Shana silently took all the credit for it. One morning, Lauren received an email notifying her that she was being transferred to another department, no longer having an official role in the marketing team. Though she felt a hint of doubt, she tried to stay calm, thinking that this was just a temporary job change. But when she faced Shana in the next meeting, Shana just smiled coldly, without a hint of remorse. That day, Lauren realized something she never expected. Shana, the person she considered her closest friend, was the one behind her removal from the company. Little by little, the feeling of betrayal crept in, spreading from within, making her feel as though she was standing before an impenetrable wall. All the effort, all the sleepless nights Lauren had put in now seemed meaningless, as all her work was taken away, ignored, and turned into someone else's success. When the matter reached the company's leaders, Lauren was called into a lengthy meeting where she was questioned about her work performance. Even though the campaign she created had been successful, rumors about her work began to spread. And not only that, former close colleagues turned their backs on her. It seemed as though everyone she trusted was part of this collapse. This feeling was unlike any failure she had experienced before. It was the feeling of being abandoned completely, with no reasonable cause for her to endure it. The whole company, her colleagues, and her best friend made her feel like she was surplus, with no place in the world she had worked hard to build. She felt as though she had been erased, like a ghost in her own life. Slow footsteps, distant gazes, and the cold silence that enveloped everything made her feel hollow inside. It was a shock she couldn't forget. She lost trust in those who had once been friends, lost trust in the things she had once valued. It was a feeling she couldn't put into words, as though everything around her suddenly became blurry and meaningless. Lauren fell into a deep pit, unable to see where to begin again, and in the midst of the chaos, she felt something deep within her soul She couldn't continue like this. She couldn't let herself be crushed forever. But one thing was certain, Lauren would not let this betrayal defeat her. This was not the end for her. She would rise again, not to fight those who had hurt her, but to prove that she could succeed once more, on her own terms, without the recognition or support of anyone. And that was when Lauren decided to start over, from the smallest steps, to prove her worth once again, through her own success. In the days following the shock, Lauren tried to maintain a calm outlook, but deep down, she knew that everything had changed. The long, sleepless nights, the hazy mornings, the space around her had become quiet. Everything seemed to freeze, not just in her work, but also in the relationships she had worked so hard to build over the years. The loneliness gradually took hold, but not the loneliness of someone abandoned. Rather, the loneliness of a person standing and looking back at their life, no longer recognizing themselves in it. She kept going, still leaving the house each day, but in her mind was a tangled mess of everything that had happened: the company, her colleagues, and especially Shana, the one who had put her in this position. But Lauren knew that if she allowed her emotions to control her, if she drowned in anger and pain, she would never be able to stand up again. She had to change, not just how she viewed the world, but how she viewed herself. Then, one autumn afternoon, as the dim sunlight began to fade, Lauren decided to do something she had never done before. She opened an old notebook, one where she had written down ideas, plans that had been forgotten for years. It had once been a tool for mapping out strategies, but now it became a key, opening doors she had long shut. Under the dim light of the small room, she began to write down her goals, not for the company, not for marketing campaigns for clients, but goals for herself, small but steady steps to regain what had been lost. She decided to try her hand at entrepreneurship. Although she had nothing but experience and ideas, Lauren understood that no one could reinvent their life without starting from scratch, and this wasn't easy. To begin, she had to face many challenges, the advice from old friends, from people she had once trusted, now seemed vague. Don't do it. Lauren, they said, the market is too harsh, and you don't have enough capital. Those words were a challenge, but also a motivation to keep going. The first step was to find potential clients. For an entire month, Lauren worked day and night researching the market, developing marketing strategies, finding partners, and handling the small financial issues that most new businesses face. She didn't care how tired she was, didn't care that she was facing anxiety and skepticism from those around her. Each day, she focused on one goal: never give up. Failures came consistently, strategies that didn't yield the expected results, meetings with potential clients that didn't lead to agreements. But instead of becoming discouraged, Lauren learned from each failure. Every time a campaign didn't succeed, she sat down, analyzed, adjusted, and kept working. She understood that entrepreneurship was not a path of roses, but a relentless battle, where the winner wasn't the one with the most talent, but the one who was the most persistent. At the same time, Lauren began to notice small but significant changes. She was no longer dependent on the approval of others. She started to realize her own strength. Each day, she became stronger, not just in her work, but in how she faced challenges. Instead of feeling helpless, she felt that she could do anything if she remained determined. One morning, during a call with a partner, Lauren heard the first words that made her feel the change. It was when one of the partners said, "You really know how to make people trust you. Everything you bring is truly impressive." Those were the first words, after a long time, that made her feel like she was on the right track. Not praise, not recognition from her old company, but simply recognition from a stranger, something she had never expected before. Lauren realized that this process was not about seeking acceptance from others. It was about rebuilding trust with herself. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She only needed to prove to herself that she could do it. But change was not always easy. When Lauren started to gain a stable client base, she faced new challenges. Although she had regular clients, people began to challenge her even more. The demands kept coming, and Lauren had to learn not just to satisfy her clients, but also to ensure that her work always met the highest quality standards. The feeling of tension returned, but this time, Lauren didn't feel afraid. She was ready to face these challenges because she understood that each challenge was just a step to be taken on the path of asserting herself amid the whirlwind of work, the sleepless nights, and the never-ending marketing plans and strategies spinning in her mind. Lauren began to feel a shift. Things were changing, though not yet to the level she had dreamed of. But at least she had regained her confidence. However, just when she felt she was about to rise, new challenges came crashing down. Her old relationship with the company, with Shana, seemed once again to be heading towards trouble. Lauren had never forgotten what had happened, but she also understood that if she wanted to succeed, she could not let emotions stand in her way. Yet, this did not mean she had forgotten everything. A month after starting her own company, Lauren received a call from a stranger. The voice on the phone sounded somewhat anxious, yet still familiar. It was from an old partner in the company. "Lauren, we need your help. The old company is facing a major issue with the campaign. They urgently need your assistance," the partner said, voice full of panic. She paused for a moment, not because she didn't want to help, but because something about it didn't feel right. Eventually, she agreed to meet the old partner at a quiet cafe. When she arrived, Lauren noticed a change in the atmosphere. The rumors she had heard about the downfall of the company didn't seem to be just talk. They can't pull themselves together anymore. "Lauren, the company is on the brink of bankruptcy. All the strategies you created have been erased. They've discarded everything you did without even a thank you," the partner said, eyes full of disappointment. Lauren sat silently, her gaze fixed on her coffee cup. All the effort she had put in was now nothing more than fragments in a broken cog. But she wouldn't allow herself to succumb to hatred or regret. She only knew that if the old company was falling into crisis, perhaps it was time for her to do something even bigger. Deciding to go back and help the old company was not about seeking revenge, but about an opportunity to prove her worth. She began the work as an external consultant, no longer part of the team, but she had learned to separate herself from the murky relationships. However, the situation was not as simple as that. Shana, the friend she had once considered an ally, was now one of the people leading the company down. What Lauren had failed to see in the past slowly became clear. Her relationship with Shana was not just competition, but a silent power struggle, where she had been robbed not only of her career, but also of the opportunities that should have been hers. One day, Lauren received an unexpected call. It was Shana on the other end. "Lauren, I need your help." Shana's voice sounded different, no longer condescending but pleading. But immediately, Lauren realized this was no ordinary cry for help. Shana was in serious trouble, and she knew that the mistakes from the past were now threatening her. In the meeting that followed, Shana admitted that she had encountered a severe financial crisis, and the company was in a state of irreparable loss. "It's gone too far. Lauren, I can't keep everything together anymore. Can you help me?" Shana said, her eyes filled with desperation. Lauren sat silently, not rushing to answer. all the old feelings rushed back. The memories of betrayal, the abandonment from the past. However, instead of blaming her, instead of holding on to anger, Lauren realized something important. She didn't have to help Shana. But if she didn't, it would mean allowing the past mistakes to continue pushing Shana to the brink of complete ruin. It would be a devastation, not only for Shana, but for the values that Lauren had built. Lauren decided to help Shana, not because she deserved it, but because Lauren saw that if she didn't do it, no one would. But throughout the process, Lauren quickly realized that Shana had learned nothing from the mistakes of the past. She was still living in lies, and taking credit for others' work had become a habit ingrained in her. The pressure of the situation forced Lauren to face a painful truth. Betrayal wasn't just about being deceived. It was the cruelty of exploiting someone's trust. During this collaboration, Lauren began to see that Shana was sabotaging even the strategy she had helped build. Shana tried to deny all responsibility and shifted the blame to Lauren when the company couldn't be saved. At this point, Lauren didn't feel anger, but indifference. She knew that if Shana didn't change her behavior, she would never break free from the cycle of self-destruction. Lauren no longer felt the need to save anything for Shana. She would help, but only to the extent that the work needed to be done. Everyone had to face the consequences of their choices, and Shana would be no exception. Lauren didn't need to prove anything anymore. She didn't need to confront the people who had betrayed her. The revenge had already been carried out by Lauren in the way she thought was right, not through negative actions, but by continuing on her own path, proving that she could succeed without anyone's help. One March morning, as the first light of the day streamed through the office window, Lauren felt a significant shift within herself. She had made it through the hardest part. Things were no longer as they had been, and she realized that she was ready for a major turning point. All the sleepless nights, the unexpected calls, the unfinished contracts, and the failures that seemed impossible to overcome had made her stronger than ever. She was no longer the woman full of doubt, full of fear and exhaustion from being abandoned. She had found a way to stand tall and move forward, not with anyone's help, but solely through her own inner strength. She had rebuilt her company from the ground up, without support from old friends, without connections in the media industry or the old company. Lauren had to find her own way, and she found that path gradually. The campaigns she launched began to yield results. New clients started to trust the marketing strategies she proposed, and her reputation in the media industry was slowly being revived. During these months, Lauren no longer felt the loneliness she once did. She no longer faced the world on her own, uncertain of which way to go. She had begun to regain trust in herself, and more importantly, she had found belief in what she was capable of. But not everything was easy. When success arrived, the people who had betrayed her in the past began to feel the consequences of their actions. Shana, who had betrayed Lauren, who had taken credit for her work and accomplishments, seemed unaware that her actions would ultimately lead to her downfall. At first, when the old company encountered difficulties, Shana tried to cover up the truth. She sought to protect herself, blamed others, and always justified her actions. However, after months of deception, the truth could no longer be hidden. The strategies Shana applied began to fail, and the company Lauren had helped build was now on the verge of bankruptcy. Lauren, though she had left the company, no longer cared about seeking revenge or proving she was right. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The success she had achieved in her current work was the clearest answer. But Shana's failure couldn't go unnoticed. Lauren no longer held on to hatred. She didn't feel joy in seeing her old rival struggle, but the peace in her mind now came from a newfound sense of freedom. She was no longer tangled in toxic relationships. Lauren was not just someone who rose again. She was someone who rebuilt herself. One weekend afternoon, as Lauren sat in her small office, her hand gently gliding over the wooden desk, she received an unexpected call. On the other end was a familiar voice, the voice she had tried to forget for so long. It was Shana. "Lauren, I need your help." Shana's voice sounded somewhat anxious, yet still carried a touch of arrogance, as if she hadn't fully accepted what had happened. Lauren paused for a moment, not because she didn't want to help, but because she knew this wasn't a typical plea for help. "The old company is in serious trouble. I can't do it anymore. I need you." Lauren could feel the truth in every word Shana spoke, but she couldn't help but wonder, was this truly regret, or just an attempt to exploit her help? Leaving a door open for the next betrayal, after a brief silence, Lauren spoke, not hastily, but with calm resolve. "I will help, but not for you. I help for the company, for what I once did there. But don't expect me to return," Lauren said, her voice calm but firm. Shana said nothing more. But in that moment, Lauren clearly understood that what she was doing was not about saving anyone. She didn't need to do anything to prove herself. What she was doing was because she knew that only personal change could bring true results, not the rescue of anyone else. The next day, Lauren met with Shana and the remaining people from the old company. Though everything had changed, and she was no longer part of the company, she still felt a strange sense of responsibility towards those who had once helped her build everything. But this time, she no longer felt the need to fix what Shana and the others had destroyed. She didn't need to regain recognition or work with the people who had pushed her out. Lauren knew that the greatest revenge was her own success. She began working as a consultant, not to reclaim credit or recognition, but to prove that her strategies still had the power to change the game. She didn't need to face off with Shana or anyone else. Every success she achieved in her work was the strongest form of revenge. A major turning point had come. Lauren was no longer an outsider. She was ready to return and rise again, not for revenge, but to prove that she could do it, even without the help of anyone. Lauren was never someone who sought confrontation. She didn't wish to see anyone's failure, but deep inside, she knew that when you give everything to rebuild your life, sometimes you can't help but notice the challenges others are facing. She had proven that she could rise again, and now it was time for her work and results to speak for themselves. Lauren's company was thriving. With every marketing campaign, she executed, yielding incredible results. Clients began to seek her out, not because of her old reputation, but because of the true value she brought with each strategy. And this made all those who had betrayed her face. The truth Lauren's absence had left a void that could not be filled. As Lauren's marketing campaigns began to succeed, her old company started to see a clear collapse. Shana, who had betrayed her, now had to face consequences that she could no longer avoid. Everything seemed to have changed. The strategies that Shana had implemented, which were once praised, now became outdated and ineffective. The company's revenue dropped. Clients started to leave, and wrong decisions piled up. Lauren was no longer confronting Shana. She didn't need to do anything to make Shana pay. Everything was unfolding exactly as life revealed the true value of each person. The old company was gradually crumbling, not because Lauren had done anything to sabotage it, but because of the mistakes made by Shana and her former colleagues, the lack of proper management, the absence of vision, and the lack of creativity led to irreversible results. Lauren continued to grow her company, and she began to earn the respect of her peers in the industry. She had proven that she could rise from the ashes without having to face or defeat those who had wronged her. She didn't need revenge. Her company was not only financially successful, but also built strong relationships, trust, and respect from the partners and clients she had cultivated. That was the result she had worked tirelessly to achieve, and that was how she proved her true worth. As for Shana, her downfall didn't come instantly. It came from a series of repeated mistakes, from complacency, and an inability to change. Shana never realized that exploiting others to achieve success was only a short-term path, and in the end, the truth would always be exposed. Her company was now facing enormous debt, unfinished projects, and a demoralized team that had lost faith in her leadership. Meanwhile, Lauren, with humility and long-term strategy, had rebuilt everything from scratch. Shana could no longer retrieve what had been lost. The campaigns she once led no longer had any impact. For those who had betrayed Lauren, the consequences were loss not only in financial terms, but also in the trust of their clients and partners. The price to pay was the collapse of their reputation and credibility that they had once enjoyed. Lauren didn't feel pleased seeing Shana's decline and the crumbling of the old company. She didn't take satisfaction from anyone's failure. The only feeling she had was one of tranquility. She wasn't someone seeking to punish anyone. She simply no longer had to live under the shadow of others. She had overcome the challenges, and more importantly, she had learned how not to let anything or anyone break her belief in herself. It wasn't just about winning in business or getting revenge on those who betrayed her. For Lauren, it was about finding herself again, living in line with the values she had always upheld. She had proven that true change doesn't come from confrontations, but from persistent effort and focusing on one's own goals. The success she achieved wasn't about harming others, but about creating a brighter future for herself. Looking back, Lauren understood that every challenge, every pain, and every betrayal had been important lessons that helped her grow. She didn't hate Shana. She simply no longer allowed herself to be controlled by the past. Her company had flourished, and more than that, she had gained freedom to live, freedom to create, and freedom to be herself. Lauren's story was not just about revenge. It was about finding herself, about proving that in life. Sometimes the most important thing is not facing your enemy, but mastering yourself, and accepting that once you trust in yourself, nothing is impossible,